Good morning, everyone, and a big welcome from me I'd like to say sunny Singapore, but it's actually pouring with rain at the moment, which is just as well because I suspect if you're watching this video, it means that the internet connection is somehow cactus, and we're going back to pre-recorded presentations. So I hope you're having a great time over there in Portugal. I'm really disappointed I couldn't be there. But my presentation today is about M&A in the communications sector, communications technology around the world. And without any further ado, I'm going to get cracking in terms of the presentation and also a stopwatch, because that's, I figure, a good thing. So again, we're talking about M&A communications technology, and clearly that's my name and my contact details. And I'd ask that, please make a note of these, and within the spirit of the TADS community, please don't be afraid to reach out with any questions you have after today's presentation. It's a great pleasure to be here. Bit of introduction, although I actually suspect that there's a bunch of my old friends in the room today, as well as joining the presentation virtually. So Mark White, and I've had a fairly substantial career in the software, IT and telecoms industries right throughout Asia Pacific. I'm an Australian, although for the last nearly 4 years I've been living here in Singapore. I did that because I sold a business that some of you may have known as a previous participant in TAD Summit's Locatrix Communications. We sold that to a public safety company in the early part of 2018. And subsequently, that company rebranded itself Locatrix. It's doing a lot of work around indoor mapping for public safety and building safety in Australia and right around the world. I've also been involved with a bunch of university technology commercializations. We had started a fintech back in the very early 2000s from a University of Queensland research project. Had a bit of an amazing ride, ultimately raised about $45 million in venture capital and exited by a trade sale to Deutsche Bank. And prior to that, I was working in both Australia and here in Singapore for American companies such as Red Hat, Compaq, and Tanner Computers. I like to pretend I'm still a little bit technical. And one of the things I'm really proud of, particularly today, is I've been a long-time TAD Summit and TAD Hack participant. We ran a number of TAD Hacks over the years in both Melbourne and Brisbane, where I'm from. And I also had the pleasure with a bunch of people who I hope are here today. We've been the very first TAD Summit in 2014 in Bangkok. We'll always have Bangkok, Alan. But also subsequently was able to go to events held in Istanbul and also Lisbon. So again, I'd love to be there today. While there's a picture of me with a suit and tie, you don't often see me in a suit and tie. But it's great to be amongst you today and talking about what I'm doing now. So let's go to what I'm doing now. I've been working since the start of 2020 with Corum Group. They're a US-based investment bank. There's a particular focus on working sell side for software and technology companies that want to find strategic acquirers. One of the things Corum is known for is we've got a pretty detailed eight-step professional M&A process. We actually kind of codified how to get the optimal outcome for a software and technology company. Uniquely, we work with a very much team approach around the world, and I guess what Corum calls the deal makers, the folks like me, are all former software company CEOs who have built and founded and ultimately sold with their own companies. We also work with an advisory board called the World Technology Council, which consists of a bunch of buyers who work with different events, sellers, and previous clients. One of the things that Corum is most known for, and I don't think this is an idle boast, and we probably sold more software-related firms than anyone else in the world. So on to today's topic, M&A communications technology. Apologies for the background noise. There's a little bit of rain as we're trying to record this. In terms of our agendas today, we're going to just talk a little bit about what we mean by the communications technology sector, because as you can probably see from the folks you're surrounded by and have seen present over the last couple of days, it's a pretty broad church, and I personally love all of it. And we certainly see value across all different types of companies in communications technology. But specifically, we'll do a quick overview of what we're seeing, sort of the transaction volumes and trends, the number of deals that are actually getting done. We'll talk about some of the values and what that's meaning both for large and also smaller companies. One of the things I'd like to do is give you a bit of a geographical perspective. I know you're sitting there in Europe, but there are participants right around the world. And I think it's kind of interesting to see the companies that are going to market and where I think there are opportunities both for buying and importantly for selling companies in the next 12 months. We'll run through a few example transactions, a bit of a summary, and then we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A, although I don't know how we're going to Q&A and MU4, but we can always try. So here's a bit of a snapshot of the communications M&A volume. And again, this is annually since 2013, and the 22 numbers are basically up to the end of Q3. So if you look at the 122 deals that have been completed so far in this calendar year, as of the end of September, the difference is between the blue and the gold is that gold is what we call a strategic acquirer, and blue is private equity. So this is kind of interesting because it's probably a longer discussion, but private equity buyers are often a lot more active in terms of the number of volume deals they're doing around the world each year. You always think about the strategics that are going to acquire my technology company. There's an awful lot of really interesting private equity firms that are looking not just for larger companies for platforms, but also smaller companies that they can kind of bolt on to one of their larger platform acquisitions. So again, what's kind of interesting about this number and these trends is, the larger number of buyers in communications technology are all these strategics. It normally would be the other way around. Now, again, if we look at deal volume by the top target sectors, and this is where we take a look at the different types of companies that make up communications technologies in general, it's a pretty broad church. You've got communication services and services providers, but also enterprise network and enterprise solutions that help provide technologies to those service providers. You've also got some carrier infrastructure folks. Sometimes they're a bit larger. And then there's also IT services and distribution. This is really representative of products like Microsoft Teams and Zoom and such. They're really becoming part of IT services. You've got a very specific category around mobility, and also that it's with information management around communications. What's pretty interesting across we're still seeing the largest single sector in deal volumes is, of course, communication service providers. And this is everything from the major players to some of the smaller hosted PBX companies, as well as mobility, which I suspect a few years ago was much higher in terms of deal volumes. Again, this is the year-to-date numbers, so 2022 and September 30. And this is based on research that we've done using data from 451 Research. If you look at the overall value of deals, one of the things when you look at the total value of the number of deals that have been done this year, it is really heavily influenced by what's been a large number over the years. Anyway, it's been influenced by a large number of what we call the mega deals, the deals over $1 billion. So they tend to have a much greater influence on the total deal value. And clearly, 2021 there were a number of acquisitions, including Microsoft's acquisition of Nuance and Rogers buying Shaw, that really pushed up that overall value. We are seeing a couple of big deals this year, but they're not quite at that level of those big major deals. And if you look at more broadly, we are seeing that trend going down slightly from a value perspective. And the sad news is, I guess, while it's a very active M&A market at the moment, and if anyone out there is thinking about selling their company, thinking now is probably better than thinking 2 or 3 years' time. And that's probably a separate discussion and a separate presentation in and of itself. But we are seeing a tremendous amount of activity across all ITs, all sort of technology sectors at the moment, but also in communications technology. Now you look at where the sellers of communications technology are coming from. About 50% of the US, and I think that's reflective of the fact that there's a very active private equity roll-up, and particularly in cloud communications market in the United States and Canada right now. Very active also in the United Kingdom across as distinct from the rest of Europe. And we are seeing some activity out of Australia, France, and Spain. But the rest of the world, which includes obviously where I sit in terms of Asia, we aren't seeing an awful lot of companies going to market. And this isn't reflective of the fact that I don't think the innovation or the capability is not being built here. I think it actually just is an underserved market. And we've got a couple of companies in the market at the moment that are really finding that hard going, because it is we just aren't seeing the investment in Asia just yet. So from a seller's standpoint by geography, USA is really dominant. Now, if you look at buyers, it's actually even more dominant from the private equity side, and that's largely representing the fact where all the private equity companies and a large number of bigger strategics are obviously headquartered here in North America, particularly in the United States. But a big proportion in the UK as well. Israel gets a Guernsey, also France, and again the rest of the world really trailing in terms of where the buyers are by geography. Now, this is kind of interesting slide. It always surprises companies, particularly if you're in that sort of small to medium size from a revenue standpoint or your evolution. We all start companies and think about the day that Microsoft acquires us or Google acquires us. We think about the strategic acquirers more often than we think about someone in the private equity space. But what's interesting is in the technology sector in M&A, the vast majority of the deals are actually done by private equity firms. And I mention this because as much as you might think of private equity as kind of a particular class of investor, in technology, we're seeing a whole new breed of quite active private equity firms that are not just buying large companies and building platforms out of the shore, but increasingly they're doing bolt-on transactions where they've acquired a particular platform. They're looking for complementary products and services. And by complementary, I mean adjacent products, adjacent types of capabilities, but also adjacent geographies. You might have a market in Europe where it complements what a private equity platform company is doing in North America. And that gives you an opportunity, even as a smaller company, to participate in that. Now, if you don't know some of these names, it's probably not a bad idea to start thinking about tracking them because, for example, I know these numbers are not especially large because it is all year to date. It's all about those 122 transactions. But what we are seeing is, again, the likes in particular, Grain have been very active. We've had quite a bit to do with them over the last few months. We're seeing that they're really active. We've seen Stonepeak have done some really big deals. But again, that ratio of bolt-ons to platform transactions, it's about 4 to 1. So think about that. For every one big acquisition they do 3 or 4 smaller ones. And that's really what gives the opportunity. If you don't know these private equity firms and how they're rolling up companies, you aren't even, if you aren't talking to them or having some approaches in that space, looking to them as potential buyers, you are going to miss out on pretty much a substantial part of the M&A market going forward. Now, if we just talk about some of the representative or larger deals going forward, these are some pretty big ones. Becerra's acquisition by Striker, nearly $3 billion announced in January. Stonepeak just acquired the safety business of Intrado, $2.5 billion. And for the a small wireless communication service provider being acquired by Quebec, which is one of the private equity firms, for a pretty substantial amount of money. Again, these are the big deals. And, again, I suspect a lot of the companies in the room are in that smaller category. So looking at some sort of other types of transactions, here's an example of what we see in the private space. Sendinblue, a company in France, acquiring Yodel.io, which is an AI-based chatbot and voice assistant software as a service and an applications provider. And this is one where, again, there's a very specific rationale that Sendinblue have been able to apply to do this, to expand their platform to have those voice communication capabilities. This is a capability that where I know there's a lot of chatbots and various AI-based platforms out there, and that's where a lot of the innovation in the communication sector is. We're starting to see that consolidation now. So really importantly, if you're competing against someone, you don't want to be the last one of those to go to market, because we are seeing those companies being acquired by large organizations right now. As a rule of thumb, the early movers in a competitive market, the early movers get the best deals. Here's another interesting one. This is fairly recent. It's only happened in September, but OnSIP in the USA acquired by UMA. What was interesting about this to me is, typically we see the service providers working at around 2 to 3 times revenue from a valuation standpoint. This one was only done at 9.75 million, which is only about 1 times enterprise value of sales. So this is a communications software as a service, so UC, hosted services for small and mid-sized businesses. Didn't really extract the sort of value that, I think what we have seen in a number of different buyers. So we didn't do this one. But it is kind of interesting to see those valuations are possibly starting to trend down. Here's another example. Again, local acquisitions, which is kind of interesting in the communication space. It doesn't have to be that way. What we see sometimes is organizations aren't looking to actually run a formal global process. When they're looking to sell, they kind of look at it around the backyard, but who's big enough to buy us? And this is one thing that I say that, you'll never have a negative outcome from truly running a global process for your business, because particularly with communications, it's available everywhere. And so in theory, just looking in your own country, your own backyard for a buyer is not going to get you the best outcome against looking at a truly global sales process to try and drive a business. Now, again, this was kind of interesting, sort of a slightly better enterprise value to sales. This was very much a service provider. This is what we're seeing around. There's a lot of consolidation, those enterprise network B2B providers. So look, we've run through a whole bunch of things really quickly today in terms of a bit of a snapshot of the market. Again, I will invite anyone who wants to reach out and connect. I'd encourage you to do that. But in terms of takeaways from the market at the moment, we are seeing that we're seeing mega deals still happen, but we are seeing that the valuations are showing signs they might be starting to drop off. Typically, M&A doesn't drop off quickly like a stock market may. But we will see over the next 2 to 3 years, values, particularly from a structural standpoint, that benefit sellers won't necessarily be as good. The other thing, obviously, private equity firms are only leading about 26% of all deals, but still making up the top telecom buyers list. This means that there's been a lot of strategics buying one company. The private equity firms have done 2 or 3. From a volume standpoint, they're starting to show up a lot more. And again, representative, there's 26% of those deals, but there's a lot of action and capability in those private equity firms. So still at the moment through Q3 of 2022, the communication service providers, so folks actually delivering communication services themselves, have led in terms of deal volume. Then some of the enterprise network and subsector following closely at 21%. I mentioned before about Asia being an unexploited opportunity. Forgive me for that, because I live in Asia, I live in Singapore. But North America and the United Kingdom continue to be the largest hub for communications tech M&A. So in terms of buyers in your own backyard, that's not a bad place to go. If you're outside of North America or United Kingdom, looking in your own country for a buyer is not going to give you the best outcome as a rule of thumb. But the other thing we are seeing is demand for that innovation, AI and analytics, team collaboration, always around cloud contact. There's still a lot of people to people, even as we move to everything becoming online. Customer experience, chatbots, video over voice, and security are really driving what is going to be a pretty strong market consolidation over the next couple of years. So I know there's many entrepreneurs in the room. Could be a good time to start thinking about, if not now, when, in terms of your own acquisition and your own ultimately achieving an exit for your business. Now, I can't let it go without a plug for something that I kind of believe in pretty strongly. Corum is a veritable fire hose of great education and content around all forms of technology M&A. There's a bunch of things you can see at corumgroup.com/events. It is all free. And my encouragement to everyone is take a look, join one of our events. Sometimes for the in-person events, we do have prices, but I can always make sure they're waived, get you invitations and freebies to that. So again, reach out, please connect, either email or LinkedIn or however you want to connect. But a couple of things are really interesting. The Tech M&A Monthly that we do is, it's a 30-minute webcast. If you miss the broadcast time of the webcast, you can always catch it again on demand. And this is something I think of as appointment viewing that I encourage every technology entrepreneur to be making benefit of each month. We are having more of that. There'll be more action in the communications technology space. And we also are getting to the point where we're producing a quarterly communications technology M&A report, which I can make sure anyone who is interested today can get access to. And other events that we do, and there's a bunch of these right around the world, they're all online at the moment. The Merge Briefing, which is a 90-minute industry update and broader overview of the M&A process, is really worth attending. I think that there's one thing Corum is really good at is educating tech CEOs about what actually M&A is. The brief summary is, if you think M&A is waiting for a good deal to come, you're not thinking about M&A the right way. And the other thing I'll just flag is a bunch of events that we run in conjunction with WFS, the World Financial Symposium, where we bring together not just tech CEOs, but also buyers, investors, and M&A experts, usually around a particular category, and there's webcast virtual events. The one I will flag is upcoming, the Growth and Exit Strategies. It's a longer event. You look at buyers, sellers, and investors, and that's always worth joining. For those of you who live in the podcast world, of course, there's a podcast, and this is one that I consider for all tech entrepreneurs to must listen. The Tech M&A podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. Please find and subscribe. It's really awesome. And that's it in terms of the overview of the market at the moment. Again, it's a pretty strong and active market for tech M&A right now in general. Communications, we are seeing, it's a select group of buyers, but we are seeing a lot of interest from the communications companies we take to market. Excuse me. And please, anyone who wants to reach out, email, WhatsApp, however, please do. And again, if this wasn't the recording, I'd be happy to take questions. As it is a recording, I'm going to ask you to drop any questions to email. I'll be happy to answer them, connect you. Thanks, everyone. Again, it's been great to be back at TAD Summit. It was an event that I look forward to every single year. And it was always, I probably told Alan more than once that it was one of the few technology conferences that I felt actually delivered great value to everyone. So hope you're really enjoying yourselves over there in Portugal. I hope everyone online is having a great event. That's all from me for now. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Cheers. Have a great day.